For more than 6 decades, Mick Jagger has been the living embodiment of rock and roll, wild, untamed, and larger than life. As the voice and driving force behind the Rolling Stones, Jagger didn't just make music. He created a global empire. From iconic performances to groundbreaking business deals, he turned fame into a fortune that few could ever imagine. But what no one expected was what he planned to do with it all. When word spread about the vast fortune Jagger had, quietly accumulated, estimated at nearly $500 million, fans assumed it would naturally pass down to his 8 children and longtime partner, ballerina Melanie Hamrick. Yet those closest to him were stunned when they discovered how he wanted his legacy handled. According to insiders, Jagger's wish wasn't to make his family richer, but to make a difference. He reportedly decided that much of his wealth should go to charity, particularly causes supporting music education and struggling artists, something deeply personal to him. For his children, it was a bittersweet revelation. They understood his reasoning, but knowing that so much of his life's work would be given away brought tears to their eyes. Friends say Jagger always believed his kids should build their own paths, just as he did when he started out with nothing but a microphone and a dream. Now, as the world reflects on the legend's monumental journey, it's not the luxury, fame, or power that define Mick Jagger's legacy. It's his decision to give back. The man who once ruled the stage with fire and rebellion is leaving behind something even more powerful: compassion. Long before the fame, fortune, and flashing lights, Michael Philip Jagger was just a young boy from Dartford, England, with a dream too big for his small town. Born into a middle-class family, Mick's father was a teacher who valued discipline and education, while his mother, a hairdresser, encouraged his creative spark. From a young age, Mick's voice had a magnetic pull, raw, emotional, and full of rebellion. No one could have guessed that this energetic kid would one day become the heartbeat of one of the greatest rock bands in history. In the early 1960s, fate stepped in when Mick reconnected with an old schoolmate, Keith Richards. Both shared an obsession with American blues and rock and roll, and before long they formed the Rolling Stones. What started as a small-time London blues band quickly exploded into an international phenomenon. With Jagger's electric stage presence and hypnotic charisma, the band redefined what it meant to be a rock star. Songs like Satisfaction, Paint It Black, and Gimme Shelter became the soundtrack of rebellion for an entire generation. But success came at a heavy cost. The relentless touring, tabloid scandals, and constant scrutiny made it difficult for Jagger to hold on to any sense of normalcy. He lived fast, loved fiercely, and burned through relationships while the world watched. Yet through it all, his drive never faded. Behind the glamour, Mick was a strategist, a businessman who quietly took control of the band's finances, ensuring that every tour, album, and licensing deal built toward something lasting. By the 1980s, Jagger wasn't just a rock icon, he was a brand. He invested smartly, branching into real estate, film, and publishing. Every move he made was calculated, turning his success into an empire that would outlive the wildest days of rock and roll. And though fans saw the swagger, few recognized the sharp mind behind it, the man already planning how his legacy would someday be remembered. For all the glory Mick Jagger achieved on stage, his private life was often marked by heartbreak and distance. The world saw the rock god with the diamond-studded smile, but those closest to him saw a man constantly torn between his passion for music and his struggle to hold on to the people he loved. Over the decades, Jagger's relationships were as legendary and turbulent as his career. From his high-profile romances with Marianne Faithfull and Bianca Jagger to his long partnership with fashion icon Jerry Hall, his love life played out like a never-ending headline. But beneath the glamour and scandal, Mick was also a father to 8 children with 5 different women. Each of them grew up in a different world, some basking in the glow of fame, others kept quietly away from the chaos. Friends say that while Jagger always provided for his kids financially, his demanding lifestyle often left him emotionally unavailable. There were moments when fame took precedence over family dinners, when the next concert meant missing birthdays and milestones. And yet, despite the distance, his children never doubted his love. It just came in his own complicated way. As the years passed and his priorities shifted, Jagger began to reflect on what truly mattered. The sudden deaths of close friends and fellow legends, from David Bowie to Charlie Watts, forced him to look inward. The realization that even icons are mortal hit him harder than he admitted publicly. In quiet moments, those who knew him say he often spoke about wanting to leave something meaningful behind, not just wealth or fame. That reflection deepened after the birth of his youngest son with ballerina Melanie Hamrick. At 80, holding a newborn in his arms reminded him of the circle of life and the fleeting nature of it all. It was around this time that Mick began revisiting his will, making changes that would surprise even his family. He had built an empire over 60 years, but now it wasn't about adding more. It was about giving back. Behind the closed doors of his London estate, Mick started outlining a plan that few expected. His children, all grown and successful in their own right, would be cared for, but the bulk of his fortune would be directed toward causes close to his heart. From funding music schools in underprivileged communities to supporting young artists struggling to break into the industry, Jagger wanted to give opportunities to those who, like him once, had nothing but a dream and determination. To his family, the decision was bittersweet. They understood the sentiment. Mick had always believed in earning your place in the world, but it was still an emotional blow. For a man who had given his life to music, his final gesture was to make sure the music lived on through others. It wasn't about denying his family. It was about inspiring them and the next generation to create, to struggle, to rise. As one close friend put it, Mick's not afraid of death. He's afraid of being forgotten, of the music dying with him. And so, the man who had once chased fame now sought something deeper. A legacy built not on money, but meaning. As Mick Jagger entered his later years, his once boundless energy began to show signs of strain. The endless touring schedule, the late nights, and the physical toll of being one of rock's most tireless performers were catching up. Fans noticed him slowing down ever so slightly. The leaps and struts were still there. But behind the flashing lights, Mick was quietly confronting his own mortality. In 2019, a health scare made headlines when Jagger was forced to undergo heart valve surgery. Though he recovered swiftly, returning to the stage with remarkable resilience, those close to him said something in him changed after that. The experience was a reminder that even legends are human. It wasn't fear that gripped him, it was perspective. He began speaking more openly about life after death, about legacy, and about how fleeting all the noise of fame really was once the curtain fell. That was when his family began to notice a difference. Jagger, once obsessed with perfection and performance, became more introspective. He spent more time at home with Melanie Hamrick and their son Devereaux. He reconnected with his older children, Karis, Jade, Elizabeth, James, Georgia, Gabriel, and Lucas, trying to make up for lost years in small, meaningful ways. But with every heartfelt conversation, there was an unspoken awareness. Mick was preparing for something. When the details of his will were finally revealed to those closest to him, emotions ran high. Jagger had chosen to allocate a significant portion of his estate, worth hundreds of millions, not to his family, but to foundations dedicated to the arts, education, and children's charities around the world. The decision stunned everyone. His children, though financially secure on their own, couldn't hold back tears when they realized how much of their father's life's work would be going toward helping others rather than them. According to those who were there, it wasn't greed that made them cry. It was the overwhelming mix of pride, sorrow, and realization. They saw perhaps for the first time the full measure of the man their father had become. Mick had lived for himself for so long, yet in the end, he chose to live and give for others. Melanie, too, was deeply moved. She later told close friends that she admired his decision, calling it the truest reflection of who he really is. The same man who once wrote Rebellious, anthems about breaking the rules, was now breaking another, the unspoken expectation that fame and fortune should stay within the family. Instead, Mick wanted his name to echo through time, not for wealth, but for generosity. And yet, behind the noble gesture, there was also a quiet sadness. Some of his children confessed that his decision made them feel the finality of his journey, that they were, in a way, already saying goodbye. The realization that their father's story was entering its last chapter was almost too much to bear. But even as his family struggled to come to terms with it, Jagger remained resolute. He often said that money's like music. It's only good if it moves. To him, giving back was just another way of keeping his song alive. By the time his health stabilized and he returned to performing, the world saw the same Mick Jagger they always had, defiant, unbreakable, and endlessly alive. But for those who knew the truth, every show felt like a farewell performance. A man singing not just for himself, but for the legacy he would one day leave behind. The tears his family shed weren't of disappointment, but of love. Love for a father, a legend, and a man who had finally found peace with his place in the world. When the world learned of Mick Jagger's final wishes, the news spread like wildfire. Fans who had followed his every move for more than half a century were stunned, not just by the size of his fortune, but by what he chose to do with it. The rebellious frontman of the Rolling Stones, the man who once sang about not getting satisfaction, had found his own kind of peace in generosity. His final act wasn't about money, it was about meaning. Music schools across the UK and the United States began receiving anonymous donations shortly after reports of Jagger's will emerged. Scholarships were set up for young musicians who couldn't afford instruments or tuition. Entire community programs were funded in his name, offering children the same opportunity he once had, a chance to dream through music. Though no official statements confirmed it, everyone knew whose hand had quietly guided those gifts. Mick had ensured that long after his voice left the stage, new voices would rise because of him. The outpouring of love from fans was immediate. Candlelight vigils, impromptu street performances, and massive social media tributes flooded the globe. In London, outside the Rolling Stones' old rehearsal studio, people gathered to sing Wild Horses and You Can't Always Get What You Want, songs that now carried a deeper resonance. They weren't just lyrics anymore. They were part of a life that had come full circle. Inside the Jagger family, emotions were still raw. His children, once heartbroken, began to see the full picture. Each of them shared memories of how their father's passion for music had shaped their lives. Jade recalled how he used to wake her early in the mornings with blues records. Georgia remembered the warmth in his eyes when he watched her modeling career take off. They realized that Mick's decision wasn't to leave them behind. It was to remind them to live with purpose. Just as he had, in one of his last interviews, Jagger hinted at what he valued most. You don't really own anything in life. Not money, not fame, not even songs. You just borrow them for a while, and if you're lucky, you leave them in a better place than you found them. Those words became a guiding truth for his family and his fans alike. Even as the spotlight dimmed and the noise of the world moved on, Jagger's influence continued to ripple. His fortune had turned into opportunity for thousands. His voice lived in every young musician strumming a guitar in a dimly lit garage, dreaming of stages they hadn't yet seen. In the end, Mick Jagger's story wasn't about rebellion, scandal, or even success. It was about transformation. The boy from Dartford who sang the blues became the man who used his blessings to change lives. His fortune didn't just make headlines. It made history, and though his family cried when they learned of his final decision, their tears weren't born of loss. They came from pride. They understood what few could, that their father's greatest performance wasn't on stage, but in the quiet, selfless act of giving back. As one of his children later said at a private memorial, he taught the world how to move, how to feel, how to live without fear. But more than anything, he taught us how to give, and so the legend of Mick Jagger lives on. Not only in his music, but in every act of kindness, every dream fulfilled, and every heart his legacy continues to touch. Because even when the spotlight fades, true greatness never dies. It simply finds a new stage.